It's Halloween today, so I thought I'd do a video on my favourite horror game released this year. There are actually several options for the title of Horror Game of the Year this year. Is it Desert Island 2? Alan Wake 2? The Resident Evil 4 remake? Even maybe Amnesia the Bunker? And just to clarify, the winner of this episode of Games Per Second isn't necessarily the best game, but the scariest game. That's why the winner of this Horror Game of the Year, in my opinion, is the one title that I left off that list: Dead Space. This episode also serves as the beginning of a brand new weekly series that I'm going to be starting on this channel, so if you're interested in that, hold on until the end of the video where I'll tell you a bit more. Anyway, with all that being said, remember to subscribe, click that notification bell if you're one of the few amazing people that likes my videos, and I present to you my Horror Game of the Year 2023. I'm a massive horror games fan, so Dead Space was well on my radar for 2023 when it was announced. I actually played the original back on the 360, and it was one of my favourite horror games at the time. Maybe I'm biased, but I still believe that no other horror game has managed to cover the same sort of territory with close to the same level of success. Look at the Callisto Protocol, which attempted to retread the same ground but never quite came close to being as great as Dead Space was. It's another reason why Dead Space was, and still is, so special to horror game fans today. The remake modernises a form of fear that's very different to that of most survival horror games. In my opinion, there are two simple reasons why Dead Space is so terrifying, and those are the enemies that you fight and the environment that you're in. Let's talk about the environment first, as that really sets the stage for you to understand why the enemies you fight within that environment are all the more threatening. The USG Ishimura. That's a name that will put chills down the spines of most horror game fans. One of the most iconic locations in gaming, the Ishimura is a fantastic map to explore. It's filled with small, claustrophobic corridors and open zero-gravity spaces where you can take full advantage of Isaac Clarke's engineer suits. It's this feeling of constant restriction of your movement that makes the Ishimura such a perfect location for the story. It's been improved massively since last time we saw it as well, with new zero-G sections allowing Isaac to fly. Graphically, the new atmospheric fog effects massively changed up the atmosphere of the game, with the Ishimura feeling a lot more creepy this time around. Those tight corridors feel all the more claustrophobic when there's fog and lightning effects, making the shadows of the necromorphs stand out. With the new and higher level of graphical fidelity, the horrors of the Ishimura stand out in a beautiful but bone-chilling high definition, and it all adds up to make Dead Space the scariest game of this year. The main reason behind that, as you'll come to realise if you choose to play it, is the type of enemy you'll be fighting within the walls of the Ishimura, the necromorphs. Anyone can pick a zombie game. Zombies are probably the most tired out game cliche, but the way that Dead Space does zombies is probably the most unique out of any horror game. Let's go over first what makes survival horror games so frightening in the first place. You're normally thrown into a map with little effective weaponry, limited ammo, and many enemies, or in this example, zombies. To cope with that, players will have to learn to execute single-shot headshots, under pressure, but they usually have a decent amount of distance to back up before they're overwhelmed. Crowds of enemies are the biggest threat to the player, as you'll almost certainly run out of ammo before you finish them all off. Dead Space is so brilliant because it flips this all straight on its head. The necromorphs in Dead Space will totally walk off headshots, and can survive several shots to the body. This is where the enemy design in Dead Space shows itself to be truly creative. To kill enemies in Dead Space, you'll have to shoot off their limbs, usually two or more. This forces the player to completely relearn their strategies and muscle memory, and aim at something that's not only harder to hit, but constantly moving. The fact that every limb takes 2 precise shots to sever, with new skin peeling technology gruesomely animating this all for you to see in detail, and the enemies don't stop moving after you take off an arm or a leg, means that there's infinitely more pressure on the player to hit their shots. Combine this with the jerky movement of the Necrophorus and the absolute claustrophobia of the Ishimura, and you have a highly pressure sensitive cocktail. You never truly feel safe at any stage of Dead Space, and that's what makes it so constantly scary, is every element of the game adds up to this incredibly on-edge experience that is as enjoyable as it is terrifying. Add the music to this as well, with its subtle notes adding to the terror behind your every experience of the Ishimura, and you have a truly terrifying game. After being rebuilt from the ground up transparently, as is shown on social media, the team at EA really made sure that this one was an evolution of its old form. It's absolutely the most impressive remake in this year of remakes, in my opinion, and it never once feels dated. Dead Space is still a masterpiece of horror, and that's why this Halloween is my horror game of the year. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let's quickly get into what my new series is and when you can expect to see it. Have you ever looked at the selection of games released weekly on Game Pass and found yourself wondering whether to download or skip? If you have, then I have a new series for you, which I'm naming Game Pass Weekly. Every week, I'll not only be looking over the selection of games released every week on Game Pass, but I'll be taking the biggest release of the week, playing it for a few hours, and then writing my first impressions in the form of a short review. This will be happening every week, releasing on Tuesday at 6 PM GMT, so if you're interested in that, turn your notification bells on. I'm also going to be streaming much more often now, with streams planned for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Five Nights at Freddy's, and more very soon. With that being said guys, thank you for sticking with me through this one. Be sure to comment and let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you all tomorrow for my Five Nights at Freddy's video. Bye bye.